Your sister decided she needed space to find herself, my mother announced over Sunday dinner, her voice carrying the particular warmth she reserved for lies she expected everyone to believe. Maya always struggled to feel like she belonged here. We supported her decision to start fresh somewhere new. I nodded along, just like my father and younger brother, accepting the narrative that my adopted sister had simply chosen to leave on her 18th birthday, until 3 months later when I found Maya living in a homeless shelter 40 miles from our house, weighing 93 pounds. With nothing but the garbage bag of clothes our parents had handed her at a bus station along with two $20 bills and instructions to make something of yourself. For 12 years my parents had collected $1,400 a month in adoption subsidies for a child they never treated as family, $201. $600 in government payments for raising a daughter they discarded the moment she aged out of the system and the checks stopped coming. When I finally understood what they'd done, I didn't just take Maya in. I took my parents down. Let me tell you about the sister I almost lost and the family I chose to destroy. Maya came to us when she was 6 and I was 8. I remember the social worker's car pulling into our driveway, the small figure in the back seat clutching a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. Maya's biological parents had lost custody due to neglect and substance abuse. She'd spent 2 years in foster care before my parents decided to adopt her. At least, that's what they told everyone. What they actually decided was to collect the adoption subsidy, monthly payments from the state designed to help families provide for children with special needs or traumatic backgrounds. Maya qualified due to her history of neglect and the developmental delays she'd experienced in early childhood. $1,400 per month. Guaranteed until she turned 18. Tax-free. I didn't understand any of this as a child. I just knew I had a new sister, and I was determined to love her. Maya was different from the beginning. Quiet where I was loud. Cautious where I was reckless. She'd learned early that attention wasn't always safe, that adults couldn't always be trusted, that love came with conditions she needed to identify quickly. I tried to show her our house was different. I shared my toys, defended her at school, crawled into her bed when she had nightmares about things she'd never fully explained. Our parents were present. They fed us, clothed us, sent us to school. They attended parent-teacher conferences and took family photos that looked normal in every way. But there were differences I didn't understand until later. My clothes were new, Maya's were second-hand. My activities were funded enthusiastically, Maya's requests were met with sighs about budget constraints. My birthday parties were celebrations, Maya's were obligations, the minimum effort to maintain appearances. I thought it was just personality differences. Some parents clicked more with certain children. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything. The disparities grew as we got older. I got a car for my 16th birthday. Maya got nothing for hers. We need to be responsible about spending, my mother explained, though we just returned from a family vacation that mysteriously hadn't included enough space for Maya to come along. I was encouraged to apply to colleges, any colleges, with parental funding promised. Maya was told that financial aid and scholarships were her only options. You need to learn independence. I was introduced to family friends as our daughter. Maya was introduced as our adopted daughter, the qualifier never dropping no matter how many years passed. She was always the outsider. Always the addition. Never quite family. I noticed, but I didn't intervene. That's the guilt I'll carry forever, the knowledge that I saw the differences and told myself they didn't mean what they clearly meant. Maya's 18th birthday fell on a Tuesday in March. I was away at college, sophomore year at a university 4 hours from home. Maya called me that morning, her voice strange. They're taking me somewhere today. Mom said she has a surprise. That's nice. Birthday surprise? I don't know. It feels weird. Weird how? She made me pack all my stuff. Everything. She said we're reorganizing my room while I'm gone. Alarm bells should have sounded. They didn't. I was 20, self-absorbed, confident that my parents were incapable of what they were actually planning. I'm sure it's fine. Maybe they're redecorating? Call me tonight and tell me what happens. She called that night from a payphone at a bus station. They left me here, she said, her voice hollow. They gave me $40 and said I need to find my own way now. They said the adoption ended when I turned 18 and they can't support me anymore. I thought it was a misunderstanding. A cruel joke. A breakdown in communication. Stay there. I'm coming to get you. They took my phone. This is a payphone. I don't even know where I am exactly. Find out. Ask someone. I'll find you. But I couldn't find her. By the time I drove 4 hours home and then tried to trace her location, she'd already left the bus station. My parents claimed they didn't know where she'd gone. They'd given her options, they said. Resources. Phone numbers for social services. She chose to go off on her own, my mother insisted. We couldn't force her to stay. She's 18. Legally, she's an adult. We gave her a foundation. What she does with it is her choice. I searched for 3 days before school demanded I return. I filed a missing person report that went nowhere. She wasn't missing, exactly. She was an adult who'd left voluntarily. I didn't find her for 3 months. The shelter was called Hope House, a facility for homeless young adults in a city 40 miles from where I'd grown up. I'd been calling every shelter within a 100-mile radius for weeks, and finally, someone recognized her description. She was barely recognizable. 93 pounds on a frame that had been slender to begin with. Hair matted and unwashed. Eyes carrying the particular emptiness of someone who'd stopped expecting anything good. Maya. She looked up from the cot where she sat, and for a moment, I saw my 6-year-old sister again, the terrified child who'd arrived with a stuffed rabbit and hoped this family would be different. Olivia? I held her while she cried. Then I took her home. Recovery was slow. Maya had spent 3 months moving between shelters, sleeping outside when beds weren't available, eating at soup kitchens when she could find them. She'd lost weight, lost hope, lost the belief that anyone would come for her. I installed her in my apartment, fed her, got her medical care, and slowly pieced together what had happened. Our parents had planned her departure for months. They'd calculated the exact date when the adoption subsidy would end, March 15th, her 18th birthday, and structured their lives around that deadline. The reorganization of her room had been the removal of all her possessions. The surprise had been a 40-mile drive to a bus station in a city where she knew no one. They'd given her $40 and a garbage bag of clothes. Nothing else. No phone, no identification beyond her state ID, no resources beyond the phone numbers for social services that were perpetually overloaded and understaffed. They'd collected $201,600 over 12 years for the privilege of raising her. And they discarded her like recycling when the payments stopped. I started investigating. Not overtly, I couldn't let my parents know what I was doing until I had enough evidence to destroy them completely. But quietly, methodically, I began gathering documentation of everything they'd received and everything they'd denied Maya. The adoption subsidy records were available through FOIA requests. $1,400 monthly, deposited into my parents' account like clockwork for 12 years. The financial records I accessed through less legal means, a family friend who worked at their bank, sworn to secrecy, who was horrified enough by what I described to help me understand where the money had gone. It hadn't gone to Maya. My parents had used the adoption subsidy to fund their lifestyle. Vacations. A boat. A kitchen renovation. My father's golf club membership. My mother's shopping habits. Maya had received the bare minimum required to maintain appearances, food, shelter, thrift store clothing, while the money designated for her care had been spent on luxuries for everyone else. The subsidy was meant to help families provide for children with additional needs. My parents had treated it as a private income stream that came with an inconvenient attachment. I found evidence of fraud beyond just the misuse of funds. The adoption subsidy program required annual recertification, documentation that the child was still in the home, still receiving appropriate care, still benefiting from the additional support. My parents had submitted false documentation for years. Reports claiming Maya was receiving therapy she'd never attended. Receipts for educational expenses that had never been incurred. Statements about activities and support that existed only on paper. They'd lied systematically to maintain the payment stream. That was criminal fraud. Prosecutable. The kind of thing that ended with prison sentences and repayment orders. I kept gathering evidence. Maya recovered slowly. I enrolled her in community college classes, helped her get a part-time job, and watched her gradually rebuild the confidence that 12 years with our parents had systematically destroyed. She didn't want to press charges initially. The shame of being discarded, of being the child nobody wanted, ran deeper than the anger. They'll say I'm lying, she told me. They'll say I chose to leave. Everyone believes them. Not everyone. Not once they see the evidence. What evidence? I'm just the adopted kid who didn't work out. That's the story. That's their story. We're going to tell a different one. I spent 6 months building the case. Documentation of the subsidy payments. Evidence of how the money was actually spent. Records of the fraudulent recertification forms. Statements from Maya about the treatment she'd received, the second-hand clothes while the family bought new, the excluded vacations, the constant reminders that she was different, less than, not really one of them. I found other witnesses too. Teachers who'd noticed the disparities. A neighbor who'd seen my parents loading Maya's belongings into their car on her birthday. The bus station clerk who remembered a crying teenager being left with nothing but a garbage bag. The picture that emerged was damning. Not just misuse of funds, but systematic abuse of a child who'd been acquired not for love, but for revenue. I took the evidence to 3 places. The state agency that administered adoption subsidies. The district attorney's office. And a journalist who specialized in child welfare stories. The investigation took 4 months. My parents were unaware until the moment police arrived at their door with a warrant for their financial records. I wasn't there for the arrest. But I was there for the trial. The courtroom was standing room only. The case had attracted significant attention. The story of a child adopted for subsidies and discarded when the money stopped resonated with a public increasingly aware of adoption abuse. My parents had hired expensive attorneys who attempted to portray Maya as troubled, difficult, and ultimately the architect of her own departure. They claimed she'd been offered support and refused it. They claimed the money had been spent on her care, regardless of what records showed. Maya testified for 3 hours. She described the second-hand clothes while I got new wardrobes. The vacation she was excluded from. The constant reminders that she was adopted, different, not really family. The morning of her 18th birthday, when she'd been driven to a bus station in a city she'd never visited and left with $40 and a garbage bag. They told me the adoption was over, she said quietly. They said they'd done their job and now I was on my own. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't say they loved me. They just left me there. The defense tried to shake her. Tried to suggest she'd exaggerated, misremembered, dramatized. Then I testified. I told the truth about growing up in that house. About watching my sister treated as less while telling myself it didn't mean anything. About the differences in how we were clothed, supported, included. About the family vacations that somehow never had room for Maya. About the conversations I'd overheard, my parents discussing when this is over and what we can finally do when she's gone. I told them about finding her in the shelter. 93 pounds. Hollow eyes. The garbage bag of clothes still her only possessions. I told them about the $201,600 in subsidies that had funded my parents' lifestyle while Maya received the minimum required to keep the checks coming. And I told them about the choice IED made, to destroy my relationship with my parents in order to get justice for my sister. They're my parents, I said from the witness stand. I lived in that house for 18 years. I benefited from what they did, even though I didn't understand it at the time. The vacations, the nice things, the college fund, some of that money came from Maya's subsidies. But she was my sister. Not adopted sister. Sister. And what they did to her, what I watched them do and didn't stop, I'll never forgive myself for not seeing it sooner. The verdict came after 4 hours of deliberation. Guilty on 12 counts of fraud. Guilty on 6 counts of false statements. Guilty on 2 counts of child neglect resulting in harm. My mother received 8 years. My father received 6. They were ordered to repay the full $201,600 in misused subsidies, plus an additional $150,000 in damages to Maya. The judge's statement was scathing. You adopted a child not because you wanted a daughter, but because you wanted income. You collected payments meant to provide for her care and spent them on yourselves. And when the payments stopped, you discarded her like surplus inventory. She looked directly at my parents. Children are not revenue streams. Adoption is not a business transaction. You violated every principle that adoption subsidies were designed to protect, and you did so knowingly, systematically, and without remorse. Maya is 23 now. She finished community college and transferred to a 4-year university. She's studying social work. She wants to help kids in foster care avoid what happened to her. We share an apartment near her campus. I transferred to finish my degree closer to where she needed to be. We're rebuilding the sisterhood we should have had all along, the one our parents' exploitation prevented. The restitution money is held in trust for her, managed by an attorney who ensures it goes toward her education and future. She doesn't want to touch the repayment from our parents, it feels tainted, but the civil damages have helped her build a foundation. I haven't spoken to my parents since the trial. They've sent letters from prison. They've tried to contact me through relatives. They've offered explanations, justifications, the particular revisionism of people who believe they did nothing wrong. I respond to none of it. Some relationships can't survive certain revelations. When you learn your parents treated a child as an income stream and discarded her when the profit stopped, there's no pathway back to normal. My brother, Tyler, is more complicated. He was younger, less aware, more protected from the ugliest truths. He struggled with the same questions I have. How much did we benefit from Maya's exploitation? How complicit were we in something we didn't fully understand? He visits Maya occasionally now. They're building something that might become sibling connection, though the history makes it complicated. We're all survivors of the same family, just damaged in different ways. Maya asked me once why I did it. You could have just taken me in and moved on, she said. Going after them cost you your relationship with your parents. Your family. Everything. You are my family, I told her. That's what they never understood. Adoption isn't a financial transaction. It's a commitment. They failed that commitment, and someone had to hold them accountable. But the cost was worth it. They needed to face consequences. And you needed to know that what happened to you wasn't your fault, wasn't because you were unlovable, wasn't because you didn't deserve a real family. She cried. I held her. The story made news beyond our local area. A journalist wrote a series about adoption subsidy fraud, using our case as the centerpiece. The attention led to reforms in several states: stricter oversight, better verification, more protection for adopted children who might be seen as income rather than family. Maya testified before a state legislative committee considering new regulations. She told her story to people with the power to prevent it from happening to others. I was 6 years old, she said, her voice steady. I didn't understand why this family had chosen me. I just wanted to belong somewhere. I spent 12 years trying to earn love that was never real. And then I spent 3 months homeless because I'd aged out of my profitability. The committee passed the reforms unanimously. Some people ask if I miss my parents. I miss the parents I thought I had. The ones who seemed loving and normal, who took family photos and attended school events and looked like any other middle-class family. I don't miss the people they actually were. The ones who saw a vulnerable child as a payment source. The ones who calculated exactly when her value would expire. The ones who drove her 40 miles from home and left her with nothing because she stopped generating revenue. Those people I've never missed for a moment. Maya has a stuffed rabbit on her bed in our apartment. Not the original one, that was lost somewhere in the 3 months she spent homeless. But I found an identical replacement, the same manufacturer and model, and gave it to her on her first birthday after we reunited. She cried when she opened it. You remembered. Of course I remembered. You held that rabbit every night for years. It was the only thing from your first 6 years you managed to keep. Until they threw it away. They threw away a lot of things. But we're taking some of it back. She's not revenue. She never was. She's my sister. The one who arrived scared and hopeful, who survived 12 years of systematic exploitation, who rebuilt herself from homelessness and hunger into a woman determined to help others. My parents saw a check. I see a survivor. That's the difference between family and fraud. And it's why I'll never regret taking them down.